In case you missed it, last week, Tom Walters, my friend and doctor of physical therapy, talked about the 5-hour longevity workout week. And this week, we'll have the rest of that conversation and dive deeper into topics such as pain and longevity. Tom also asked me some questions this week about longevity medicine, so make sure to tune in.
In Pursuit of Health and Wisdom, Sapio with Buck Joffrey.
You mentioned sleep. Sleep's an area of a lot of interest to me because the impact we know it actually has on, neurodegenerative disease, or, like mostly Alzheimer's disease, actually. We know that there are certain types of sleep that are more important than others for not developing these diseases. Talk a little bit about this in the context of pain. Like how is
Yeah,
that?
yeah, the pain. So in pain, there's studies looking at. So there's research on sleep both for pain and injury prevention, and so you'll see some studies looking at injury risk and performance, like in athletes. So you take athletes and look at certain levels of sleep deprivation, they'll be more likely to get injured
Uh-huh.
or to have detriments in performance. In pain, you see more of a you'll see a lack of sleep be tied to the development of kind of persistent pain states. So if somebody like spine pain is really common with this, both neck pain and low back pain, if people, and it's sort of a chicken or the egg
Yeah.
kind of debate here, but if people have a lack of sleep and probably lack of certain portions of that sleep,
Yeah.
maybe it's like
Yeah.
REM sleep or deep
Yeah.
sleep or
Yeah.
whatever it
Yeah.
is, but when people have a lack of sleep, you tend to see things like neck pain will be exacerbated. And then that's where you get into this kind of cycle where then if your neck pain is exacerbated, it makes it harder to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so people will get in kind of this sort of negative cycle. But you see sleep is probably, of all the factors you could think about, if you have a pain issue or an injury that you're trying to heal or a pain that you're trying to get rid of, I think sleep is probably in the top three
Yeah.
of the thing you
I would
start
think.
thinking about.
Yeah. And specifically, I would think, and I don't know the data on this, but the first half of the night, and specifically when you're talking about before midnight, not the first half of when people go to
Yeah.
bed, you get the deep non-REM sleep, and that's usually the restorative part. I'm guessing I don't know that there's any research on it, but I'm guessing that's probably where the most important elements for healing would be.
Yeah, I think
So,
I don't know, I haven't looked at these studies recently on pain, but you do hear it a lot about healing, that our just musculoskeletal system, most of the remodeling and healing happens in sleep, and I think it is in that deep sleep.
mhm.
I have one of these tracker kind of mattresses.
Oh, okay.
It's amazing. I love it. Well, you've got the
It's
Aura.
like the
Yeah.
Aura
Do you
ring, yeah.
sleep with yours on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It is nice to get that data. I've got a kind of a mattress cover that detects my heart rate and sleep
Uh-huh.
cycles and the same kind of
Is
thing,
it the
but
Cool
it's
8
eight
thing?
sleep.
8 sleep,
Eight sleep.
8, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
But it's
yeah.
amazing because I used to wake up hot and that would disrupt my sleep. And so
Yeah,
this keeps me cool. And it is amazing to look at my data the next day. And most of my deep sleep, probably the heavy like hour and 10 minutes or something is right early before midnight.
right.
And when I've had nights where I've had alcohol
Yep.
or I've gotten to bed late and that I don't get the same amount of time in that deep sleep, I feel like that's probably, if I look at my whole sleep analysis, maybe the biggest factor in how I feel the next day and how
Yeah,
I've recovered. So
yeah. Sleep is an amazing, like that's one of the major pillars for longevity too. And that whole area has just completely transformed. I mean, I was a surgical resident. And obviously, we didn't sleep
did
very
sleep.
much, but no one talked about sleep in medical school. I think we had like 2 lectures on it, a bunch of little EEG graphs, and everybody slept through the lectures. No one
That's where
cared.
you got your sleep.
Wasn't even on the test. You know what I mean? And but it's pretty remarkable how much that matters. And
Mhm.
I feel like people need to focus on maybe learn a little bit more about this, especially because if you sleep, but you sleep from 2 a.m. to noon, that's a completely different kind of sleep than if you're sleeping from, starting at 9 or 10 o'clock for these reasons we're talking about.
Mhm.
So that's another consideration as well. How, yeah,
Yeah, I think,
yeah,
and totally. I think it's nice to see that some of these researchers that podcasts and things are
yeah,
talking a lot more about
yeah.
sleep. But I think even recently they linked night shift work they linked it with as a carcinogen.
It is a carcinogen.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
It's was in the um I think they called it probable carcinogenic
mm,
from the IARC.
mm.
That's like in the, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad stuff. And it's too bad because some people just kind of have to work
Yeah,
in the middle of the
it's
night. But I
true.
mean,
Some
at
people, the
least you got to,
reality is you can't.
yeah.
That's just what they got
Yeah,
to
I
do.
mean, but unfortunately, some people will have to work in a coal mine too, and that's not going to be very, very
Totally,
helpful
yeah.
either. But yeah. And how about in terms of diet,
Mhm.
in terms of supplements, stuff like that, in terms of pain, in terms of recovery? What's your take on that?
Well, nutrition is such a fierce area. There's a
Yeah.
lot of. I still think when you look at the research, I went to an anti-inflammatory course the other day, a physician who was hosting this, kind of looking at all the different research on it and longevity and just health and
Hmm.
diet. And this was all research up around inflammation, but what was interesting about it is that you can look at all these different things because almost every chronic disease we talk about in the body now has some inflammatory component, right? And
Hmm.
a lot of this is thought to be true with chronic or persistent pain states,
Uh-huh.
so I think when you're looking at pain, the thing I still see as having the most research from a nutrition standpoint is your diet. And
Yeah.
it seems like these whole food plant-based diets have the best research
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
reducing inflammation. So I think to me, when I'm talking with somebody who has pain that's been around for a long time, and so the if you look at the International Association for the Study of Pain, they kind of have the main definition on pain. When you start to look at a pain going from like an acute, kind of more simple pain to being more of a chronic condition, usually it's a cutoff of around 3 to 6 months. Most tissues in the body will heal at that time frame. We know some go longer. I mean, some tendons can take a year,
Yeah.
so but most tissues will heal in like a 3 to 6 month window. So if you still have pain after that, we start to wonder, is something happening to where you're transitioning from kind of an acute pain to more of something's changed in your nervous and
Hmm.
immune system in those systems, and you're developing more of a chronic pain. And then you start looking at, if you're looking at all these factors and you're looking at nutrition, the one that I see having like I say, having the best evidence is going towards a plant-based
Hmm.
Mediterranean, the DASH diet that's often used for heart disease. Those seem to have the best evidence in terms of reducing inflammation. So I think about that when we're talking about pain. If somebody's healing from an injury where there's an actual tissue injury, like you strained a muscle or tore a ligament, I also will think about kind of total calories. Like, are they getting enough calories to heal the tissue? Obviously, if they're hypocaloric, it's going to be hard to
Yeah.
heal. Protein intake,
Yep.
surgeons talk
Yeah.
about that a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like I've met surgeons who will even give people protein kind of supplemental drinks. I don't
Yeah.
know if you guys, for
Yeah.
neurosurgery, if that was ever,
Not so much. I mean, we were dealing with a different animal
yeah. And
altogether,
those are
but
probably smaller,
yeah. Yeah.
less traumatic. I've heard about the
Yeah.
orthopedic surgeons sometimes where
Yeah.
they're
Ortho
really a lot
guys
of
for
trauma.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think protein intake is a big component for people to think about. And then you hear about, I personally, from a nutrition standpoint, I now, as I've got a little older, I take collagen. Like I'll do like
Yeah.
an oral collagen, and I see some studies emerging looking at pain, helping with pain. There was just a randomized control trial looking at that, joint health. And then I also take creatine, which I don't know
Yeah.
if you read much about this, but
Uh,
creatine is
yeah,
one of the most studied
creatine has a
supplements,
lot of benefits. I actually
cognitive
don't
and
take it
physical.
just because I already have like this big
Oh, your supplements? Yeah,
bucket of
yeah,
supplements that I
yeah,
take every day,
yeah,
and I'm like, yeah, I gotta add that too. Oh,
yeah.
there's no room for
Yeah.
that.
Well, creatine's interesting. I mean, because
Right.
it has all this, everybody took it in high school for weightlifting,
Yeah.
right? It
Right.
was like if you're
Right.
an athlete, you took creatine,
Yeah.
which it does have all of those, kind of physical performance kind of side
Yeah.
effects, but now they're finding all these cognitive benefits from it. So
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
probably think about it more from that standpoint now, the cognitive side. But yeah, I
Yeah.
take creatine each day and, fish oil and multivitamin,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I just did blood work again. I hadn't done blood work in quite a while. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say I'm 41. I hadn't done it. The last time I did blood work was when I was 25.
Sure.
So I went and signed up with this group that really looks at health optimization. And I was having issues with kind of sleep quality and just energy. And I wanted to just look at all these things. And so it was really interesting to go through that and look at kind of did I have any micronutrient deficiencies? And I was a little
Yeah.
low in magnesium.
Uh-huh.
My B12 was low. And I think if people haven't done blood work, that
Yeah.
is a great thing. Like, do a really comprehensive work with one of these groups. You can sign up with them online. They send you to a lab,
Yeah.
and then you just analyze all this stuff because a lot of healing, pain, energy, I think a lot of that stuff people can have. We talk about how the nutrients we're not getting from food now, even if you are eating well.
Yeah.
I just think there's a place sometimes for specific supplementation. Like I started taking magnesium because that
Sure.
magnesium was low and and again, like, is it
Sleep.
placebo? You sleep, it
Sleep
helps,
too.
seems to help my
Yeah.
sleep and energy, and it's probably been a month I've been taking it. And we talked about placebo. Who knows? I feel like I'm somewhat resistant to, but who knows? I'm feeling
Well,
better.
there's real data there too, right? I mean, we were talking about the Aura Ring, and so this is part of this, again, this whole new outlook on medicine that I've been, and I think some other people are calling medicine 3.0, which is, you know, generating the data yourself. And, to the extent that you get a blood test and you obviously have done more than your typical complete blood count and chemistries. I mean, there's things called cardio IQs, which I think are great. I've had genetic testing done. And when you do that kind of thing, what's pretty remarkable is that you can catch things that there's no way anybody else is really necessarily going to catch, right? Like, I mean, I did genetic testing, um, and I had a mutation that is actually 30% of the population has at least one mutation in, and it's the MTHFR gene. The point of this thing is that if it doesn't work well, you have a little bit of a rise in homocysteine levels that are correlated to heart disease. And I found out I had that. That's the bad news. The good news is all I had to do was start taking a methylfolate vitamin, and that took care of that problem
Yep.
entirely. So these things are incredible, right? I mean, another story, I think I was saying, probably somebody you and I both know, one of my friends, she started wearing an Aura Ring when she started listening to my show because I've been talking about sleep all the time. And she noticed that her deep non-REM sleep was terrible and she was freaked out about it. And then talked to, one of my friends, my doctor friends, about it. And he's like, and she was talking about how she drank a glass of water right before she went to bed. And he's like, why do you do that? She's like, well, I thought it was good for me. Well, she had to get up and
Yeah.
pee at some point between, 9 and midnight, and that was reducing her deep sleep. She stopped doing that. Boom, optimal. So it's all about feedback, right? Getting blood, not only blood tests, but, monitoring your health. And you can literally put years on your life, of good life on, by just taking that into your own hands.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one is amazing. I mean, it is amazing to be able to get this data and track these things. And that one's another example. You hear about how many people get up to urinate in the night and how much that disrupts sleep.
Oh,
And it's
it's
like, I
terrible.
used to do the same thing. I used to drink a bunch of water before bed, and now
So
I just
everybody tells you it's so good for you,
I
right?
literally like don't. I have almost gotten like I'm so strict. I'm so strict about my sleep now because you just feel so much better when you get good sleep. And once you know what it feels like, you don't want to go back. I mean, but I don't drink any fluids like pretty much after dinner time anymore because I just do not want to wake up. It's hard to go back to
Oh,
sleep.
yeah.
You can see it on you see it on on the trackers that your sleep quality is. Yeah.
100%. I mean, I try to do at least 2 hours,
Hmm.
and then I'm like, shoot, I forgot my supplements, and
Yeah.
I'll be like, how little water can I drink
Get these
to
down.
get
Yeah.
this
That's
down?
awesome.
But yeah, no, it's a big one.
I talked about a few of the supplements I take.
Yeah,
Like I said, that I do like the fish oil, I'll do like a multivitamin, the creatine, the collagen. I actually don't have a huge, I started the
yeah,
magnesium, but
yeah.
what are you having that medical back? Yeah, this might be an hour show just to hear that.
I know. Okay,
Or what are
so
some big ones? Like if you think about, yeah, like what would
well,
be
so
your,
let me give you a framework for
yeah,
the way I think about
yeah.
it, right? Because I think that's what I think a lot of people haven't really um, done. And the problem is, like, right, these days, as you mentioned, there's like you're getting bombarded from all these different supplements, and you have no idea what to take, what not to take. And I don't pretend to know the answer to that, but what I can tell you is that there are certain things that I know that are going to affect longevity. So I try to take something related to that in multiple different
Mm,
categories. So I'll tell you that one thing that you were talking about before with
mm,
pain, which was inflammation.
yeah.
Inflammation is. I used to kind of laugh about it because I just felt like everybody was talking about inflammation, but I'm like, you know what? They're right. Inflammation is the problem. And one of the biggest issues in our diet is is high blood sugar, right? So I don't have diabetes, but frequently before a meal I will take a carbos, which actually artificially just kind of blunts any sugar spikes.
Yeah.
That's a medication, but another thing that you can do is right before, like 20-30 minutes before you eat, you could have apple cider vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is not a supplement,
Mhm.
but we know is that it can reduce blood sugar spikes up to 30%.
Whoa.
So so what I do is I have like a smoothie with some stuff and a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar about 20 minutes before I have lunch,
Mm.
and if I can do it before dinner too, and that basically is knocking out that. So that's
Can I
not
ask you about that one something about
yeah,
that?
for sure.
This high blood sugar thing, I was just listening to, for a while I did a continuous glucose
Yeah.
monitor, and it was
Yeah.
really interesting to kind of look at what I ate typically, because
Yeah.
I eat a lot of the same things, like what would cause a glucose spike,
Hmm.
and interesting to see that when I would feel crappy after something, it matched up with a big spike and that
Yeah.
drop. And
Yeah.
I was listening to some people talk recently. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this about looking at diabetes, whether it's type 1 or type
Hmm.
2, and insulin resistance. And some in the blood work when I did this, they were talking a little bit about this, that, we think of the muscles as being like the sponge that sucks up blood sugar, right?
Yeah.
And they were talking about in some of this newer research that it might not just be things that are higher glycemic index and sugary, but also pairing that with saturated fat.
Hmm.
And that there's some thought that when your muscles can't absorb blood sugar well, it's because fat is getting into the muscle cell.
Yeah.
Do you think about saturated fat in your diet, or?
I do,
Yeah.
but for slightly different reasons. Like, so if you and this is going back to my biochemistry background. Actually, there was a saying. This is like I was in college in the '90s, and so way before any of this stuff. And I
Mm,
took an exercise biochemistry advanced course, and there was I remember my professor saying, "Fats burn in the fire of carbohydrates."
mm, mm,
So in other words, that when you juxtapose those two together,
mm,
it's problematic. Like
mhm.
fats in themselves might not be a problem, but if you put them in the context of carbohydrates, that's when the fats become a problem. And
Got
it has to do with various biochemical reactions. But yeah, I mean, um, I think that probably is more of an issue. I think that the key, in my opinion, though, is really about euglycemia,
Mhm.
right? I think if you maintain euglycemia, that's where that's where you're going to get the benefits,
Mhm.
because
Do you mean low glycemia?
actually a very
Oh,
even, sort of
even.
not
Yes.
high
Got it.
glycemic profile. And the reason for that is I think it's useful sometimes to even understand, like, visually
Mhm.
why, like, the sugar is not great for you.
Mhm.
So I've used this analogy before, which is not very scientific, but I think of like blood sugar as kind of slime,
Mm.
right? And
Hmm.
so when you eat and you just have a bunch of blood sugar spiking in your blood, and if you don't have and you have no if you're not controlling it, that slime binds onto all sorts of cellular structures, and it makes it not work as well, and it makes inflammation
Mm.
everywhere. Now we measure that with hemoglobin A1C,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yes. Okay. I
That
remember.
is literally glycated hemoglobin.
Uh-huh.
So that's a measure of how much these proteins are getting slimed,
Got it. Okay. I
right?
remember seeing that in my blood work.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So you want to make sure that your hemoglobin A1C is, our target's generally below 5.2.
Okay.
But that's it. But I think the point I'm trying to make, though, is from if you consider the number of different disease processes that we think inflammation is really behind, and that's, cardiovascular disease, various cancers, chronic pain, as we've
Mm-hmm.
talked
You're
about
saying
already.
Alzheimer's, like
Yeah,
so.
Alzheimer's, all these things, they are heavily, heavily dependent on inflammation. And probably the biggest cause for most people of inflammation is high blood glucose.
Yeah.
And the spikes
Mhm.
of blood glucose that you can avoid by, some of these techniques like
Yeah.
that we're talking about.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
But
So the apple cider
apple
vinegar
cider vinegar
before 30
will,
minutes before a meal.
yeah,
And
20, 30
and
minutes,
how much
like
do
a
you take?
teaspoon,
A
and
teaspoon.
yeah, in
Hmm.
in in like a glass of water.
Okay, got it. Mix it
Yeah, and
in.
just
Okay. Yeah.
down it,
Okay. Okay.
not right before bed, but
Yeah.
right before.
Well, that one, I mean, I feel like I hear so much about even just the number of people in our population who are pre-diabetic and don't know about it.
Yeah.
It seems
And
like it's
by the way, that's the problem, in my opinion, with again what we talked about with traditional medicine,
mm,
pre-diabetes. I mean, this is just really a spectrum, right? Of
yeah.
how much inflammation,
hmm
how much glycation your proteins have.
hmm
So if you're getting into that level where your hemoglobin A1C is not at target at 5.2, but at 5.5 or 5.6, um, these days the doctors will be like, yeah, just be careful. You've got this, your blood, you're getting a little pre-diabetic there, but they don't really treat it
hmm
until you're technically a diabetic. But it's not like you switch a button and all of
Sure.
a sudden you're diabetic.
Yeah.
As you're
Yeah.
drifting down this way, you're drifting down a pathway of being less healthy and having more inflammation in your body and being prone to all of these diseases. So that's why I believe in like really aggressively treating and avoiding hyperglycemia.
hmm
So that's one thing. And
Yep.
that's,
Yep.
you were asking me about supplements, but
Yeah.
when I think of inflammation, all the different points of longevity,
hmm
there's a reason for why I'm doing each one of
Yeah.
them. And certainly from when you think about longevity, you have these pathways that, if you've read
The genetic.
David
Yes.
Sinclair's book
Yep.
on,
Fasting and all his stuff,
all
like
that
genetic.
stuff,
Yeah.
there's these different pathways, right? And so what I try to do is each one of my supplements that I'm
hmm
taking has a specific role in all these different
Got
pathways.
it.
So for example, I'm taking there's these things called sirtuins, which are
hmm
these sirtuin pathways that are thought to help with longevity. So in order to improve or maximize that, I'll take an NMN or
Yeah.
one of these types of supplements. There's a pathway for mTOR is another pathway, and you want to downregulate mTOR. So I actually take mTOR stands for mammalian target of rapamycin.
Mhm.
So I take rapamycin to downregulate mTOR.
Mm.
Then there's this issue of cellular senescence. So basically, zombie cells.
Mhm.
We know that certain cells as we get older just stop multiplying, but they don't die. They're just zombie cells. They sit around, they secrete nasty hormones and things like that,
Yeah.
and make other cells into zombie cells, can turn into cancer at some
Mhm.
point. So there's a few different things there. There's fisetin, uh, uh, there's spermidine. So basically, I've just picked a couple of those
Mm.
out for that pathway.
Are those prescription drugs?
No, those
Oh,
are
those
supplements.
are
Yeah,
supplements.
yeah. Those are supplements. So I do it in a very sort of methodical way where I look at all the different things that cause aging and
Sure.
the different pathways, and I'm trying to address each pathway. And so I think it's a little bit different from, like, I think, of course I'm biased, but I think that's the way to do it. Otherwise, you just get shotgun. Everybody's telling you to take
Yeah.
20 different things. I mean, do you really need to take,
Mm.
3 different supplements that all are for cellular senescence issues? No,
Mhm.
you don't. You probably should really only need to take one of those, right?
And
So,
where do you feel like supplements fit into kind of your overall framework? If you think about all these other things like sleep,
uh-huh.
diet, exercise, are the supplements the cherry on top? Or
Yeah.
do you think any of them are more powerful than?
So that's a very good question. And the way I think about it is this. I think of all the things we talked about, exercise and diet and sleep, all those types of things, as a means of optimizing with the technology and information that we have now. If you do those, you're going to live longer and for better for a longer period of time. That gets really interesting because what I think is going to happen over I think within the next 2 decades, is this period in time where we can potentially stop biological aging and potentially even reverse it, right? That's where I think a lot of these drugs and supplements are coming in. So let me give you an example.
Yeah.
So the I think sort of the most accepted theory on aging is this information theory that David Sinclair talks about, which is essentially that you've got these genes along these, big chromosomes, and then between the genes, you've got things that kind of tell what genes to turn on and what genes to turn off. And as we get older, those areas that are basically the traffic signs start getting blurred, and then the body starts not producing things nice and crisp anymore, and that is effectively aging. And there, so that's the information theory of aging, right? In a nutshell. Supplements and drugs can, and I think lab studies are currently showing, able to reverse that damage. So actually, Sinclair's lab a month ago showed, and this was just a bunch of cells, human cells, but using a combination of supplements and commercially available drugs that we have now was literally able to reverse biological aging in human cells. So using things that we already have,
Yeah, that's amazing.
right?
Well, I haven't followed his researches. That's
Yeah.
amazing to hear. I mean, I've heard him on different
Yeah,
podcasts and things,
yeah.
and heard about some of these different supplements, but I haven't pulled the trigger, because I just didn't do enough of my own research at this point to like figure out, is this worth investing in this supplement? Because like you say, there's so many you get bombarded with. But
Yeah.
that's amazing, because it's so interesting to hear that timeline, because I feel like that timeline on being able to stop aging and reverse it. Like, is this something we're actually going to be able to do? It's
I
crazy.
think we are. And here's why. Okay, so, and again, is this not everybody, not every scientist, not every doctor who even is up on this stuff believes this, but I do. But we can already do it in the lab with animals. We can already reverse biological age.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, we can do that. And if we could do it in animals, why can't we do it
Yeah.
in?
Not that many steps away, doesn't seem.
No,
Yeah.
there's not. There's not. And we know that we have some pretty good ideas of what those, um, you know, what those pathways are. Now, granted, when you talk about reversing aging, when you talk about even slowing down or reversing aging, it may not be the case that every part of your body is going to be equally affected by that reversal as well. I mean, I know we had Dr. Joel Rothman on from the Center of Aging and Longevity from UCSB. And his concern was that maybe brain wouldn't, the blood-brain barrier would create some of a problem for reversal in the brain. I tend to think that we can get around that problem. But that's because I'm a surgeon and
Yeah.
he's a lab scientist, and I've
You're
looked
used to
at
getting
brain.
around that
I
problem.
you just drill a hole in there. But
That's so interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear it from your perspective, because, I've heard lots of talks about this on different podcasts, but I haven't been following that research.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to think about that idea.
Well,
Makes me want to look at these
yeah.
like you're talking about. So there are 3 tracks you look at along those genetic kind of.
There's a few different pathways. Yeah, the
Pathways.
sirtuin pathways, the
Yep.
mTOR pathways, cellular senescence, and then I think of those things as sort of like, those are the things that I can't say for sure are slowing down my aging or reversing it. By the way, you can check how you're aging biologically. There are these biological clocks, and what those have you heard of those?
I've heard of them, but how do you test it?
Okay, so they're blood tests.
Oh, really?
Or they could be like just
Like
spit.
a cell. Yeah.
And what they're looking at is exactly what I talked about before. These changes in those spaces between the genes that are called the epigenome. And they're looking at chemical changes to the epigenome called DNA methylations. And so you can quantify biological age by the changes that are occurring in the epigenome. So what they do is they'll take your blood, see what kind of epigenetic changes you've got, and then they'll compare that to literally millions of people based on machine learning, and say, okay, well, this guy
compares to this person at this age.
This guy on our spectrum is already 70 years old, even though they have no idea how old you are. Or they may say, this guy, even though he's 41, he's actually 25 years old biologically. And those clocks are extremely accurate at predicting death
Hmm.
in the sense that if the average age is, of death is 78, 80 years old, they're extremely accurate at predicting when you're going to die. Now, that's not information that you necessarily want to know unless you can do something about
Sure.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of these supplements, and people talk about this all the time anecdotally, are reversing
Hmm.
biological ages already.
Yeah.
So we know we can do it. We know we can do it at that level too. We know that it's possible to do. Well, Tom, we've been talking for a while, but I want to talk a little bit about this. This is the Rehab Science: How to Overcome Pain and Heal from Injury. So obviously that's what it's about. Who's it for?
Well, we wrote the book really for two populations. This question comes up a lot because people will message me and say, "Hey, I don't have a medical or rehab background. Is it only for practitioners?" And to answer that, it was really so much of my audience are people, just general people who have pains and injuries and are looking for solutions. So that was kind of the initial intention, was to create kind of this like injury pain kind of encyclopedia where you could just pick it up and find information and programs that you could just start implementing at home. So definitely for that person, the person with no background in medicine or rehab and just wanted a resource, like I've got plantar fasciitis, I want to know what to do about it.
Right.
There's a program in there for it. I've got tennis elbow, what can I do about it? But it is, I was telling you earlier, it's basically a therapeutic exercise book. It's all the exercises you'd usually be prescribed in physical therapy.
Yeah.
So it also was meant to help practitioners. So, I've had certain types of doctors like physiatrists and orthopedists, family medicine doctors want to buy it. Trainers, a lot of personal trainers, they will inevitably work with clients who have pain, but they don't always know, oh, this person's got pain on the outside of their hip. What could this be? Is there a certain exercise I should give them? So
Right.
we definitely wanted to cover them too. And even as a physical therapist, I mean, when I was a new grad, this would have been helpful to me.
Yeah.
Like when I was the students or, student physical therapists will buy it, new grads in their first 2 years that are like, what do I do with this patient? So it's really those two kind of groups. It's like the regular person and movement and medical
Yeah.
practitioners.
Fantastic. Well, it's a beautiful book too. Actually, I had it on my table. I didn't even, and it was
Looked good
mixed.
over there.
It looked great, right? But yeah, thanks so much for being on, and
Yeah,
this has been really fun talking.
sure.
And let's do it again sometime.
Heck yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be on here and learn from you at the same time. It's not often that I get to pick a physician's brain and a neurosurgeon, so pretty awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Sapio with Buck Joffrey. A quick reminder that while I am, in fact, a surgeon, nothing I say should be construed as medical advice. Now, make sure to include your physician in any medical decisions you make.